This guy right here, this guy right here was this close, this unbelievably close to taking Moscow. This close to being the big dog in charge. Let's talk about this article. So, the thing that got me about this article is just this tweet from Michael Weiss. I saw this in my feed. I read it. I read the lines here, and I refuse to process this information. Okay? What we're about to read, I'm giving you a gigantic warning. Okay? It is not fun. It is gross, and you will not enjoy it. There's a part of your brain that's like, oh, I'll watch this video and I'll be happy that I have this information. You will not. You will not be happy that you have the information I'm about to give you. Okay? And I'm going to read this, and you can check out immediately once you realize what we're in for, okay? Prigozhin likes 18-year-old virgins because he thinks their bodily fluids preserve his vitality. He also has metallic balls implanted under the foreskin of his quote-unquote very small penis. An interview with a woman who sold her virginity to Prigozhin. So, now that you know what we're in for, I don't really know what to say here. I was left less speechless during the Prigozhin coup than I am right now. Let's read the article. Yevgeny Prigozhin may be one of the most recognizable Russians in the world, but his private habits, up until recently, have remained as obscure as he once was. Since his failed coup last month, the world has gotten to know how Putin's chef used to live. There's the Bob Gucciani. Yeah, I'm going to mispronounce a lot of stuff. Bob Gucciani-style pleasure dome in St. Petersburg, the central casting disguise kit, the closet of wigs, and the golden guns. But until now, Prigozhin's bedroom habits hadn't been disclosed. The insider recently spoke to a Russian woman who sold her virginity to Prigozhin when she was 18 and now says she regrets the decision. To protect her identity, we've agreed to refer her only as Masha. Her testimony was corroborated by a representative of a sex workers union in Russia. The mercenary boss likes his girl on the younger side, but he also has an eccentric obsession with exchanging bodily fluids with virgins. He believes having sex with first-time partners prolongs his youth, according to Masha. You know, if you go back in history, like to a lot of like the ancient kings, definitely like in China and places around the world, there seemed to be some obsession with certain world leaders. This wasn't the majority of them, but with certain world leaders of like finding like the gift to eternal life. You know, this like impossible to achieve goal, this thing that didn't exist, that they'd spend like all of their free time away from like the most basic fundamentals of governing the state trying to accomplish. And I have a feeling that if Prigozhin was alive in like ancient China or one of those type scenarios where he had that type of power, he'd be like the king beheading people because they hadn't brought him like the life's like famous like elixir, like an elixir to keep him alive forever. I feel like he'd be one of those kings sending out like spies into the world to try to find the gift of eternal life. Before his downfall and exile to Belarus, Prigozhin used to keep a rotating harem of very young, a little over 18 girls in rented rooms at Solosok's Hotel in St. Petersburg. He had sex without a condom, the sex workers union representative told the insider, because he believed that this is how he exchanged energy and fluids, as if he received a charge of vitality from them. Can you believe this guy was like within like a hair's breadth of taking Moscow? This guy right here, this guy right here was this close, this unbelievably close to taking Moscow. This close to being the big dog in charge. Of course, we'll never know how close he was exactly, but due to recent reports we've gotten from the Daily Beast and other locations, Putin didn't know how to respond to him. He left him stunned. He left him shook. And this guy, Mr. Virgin, like, immortality cure, was that close. Okay, sorry, continuing. Prigozhin also had metallic spheres implanted in the foreskin of his very small organ. Devices he apparently believes enhances his own sexual prowess and pleasure for his partners. In fact, the sex union source said, women found the balls to be painful during the intercourse. It was in the fall of 2019, she told The Insider. I was 18 years old. I lived in St. Petersburg. I was deeply depressed and had to go to the hospital. At the time, I met another girl around my age, and she had been kicked out of her home, and she really needed money. She asked me if I would like to sell my virginity for 623 American dollars. She received the commission. I was like, okay, let's. Although I didn't need the money that much myself. Masha was introduced to Prigozhin's pimp, another woman in her 30s with long dark hair, at a cafe in St. Petersburg. She said I had to go to the clinic to have my virginity checked. I was sent to the SOG's clinic, right there on the other side of Prospect. At the reception desk, you had to say the password, women's sports. Ugh. Masha said, to indicate you were having your hymen inspected for Prigozhin. He had a password? He had a password for hymen checking? So okay. So not only did Prigozhin do this with the metallic balls and the virginity immortality cure, but he did it so often that he had a medical establishment with an arrangement where the women that he had picked to take the virginity of would go there to make sure that they're legit, the real thing, actual virgins, and not somebody trying to, like, scam him out of their virginity, if that's a real sentence I just said. After Masha's virginity was confirmed, she was sent to the Solosok's hotel on the western side of the city. It seemed like there were always rooms reserved for him, and the girls there were always people who supervised them. There were girls, not virgins, who paid $5,000, $78 for sex. There were ones who told me that it was Prigozhin. They hadn't seen him for several days. Masha said she already knew the name from independent media investigators. She had read into Prigozhin's St. Petersburg troll farm and his private army's activities on behalf of Russia all over the world. For those of you who don't know, Prigozhin, before becoming famous with Wagner and specifically their activities in Ukraine, was also famous for managing the troll farms that were the center of the big scandals of Russia's involvement in the 2016 election. Real thing, by the way. Time is a flat circle. Masha said she already did. In complete shock, I went to the hotel room and waited for him. He started knocking on the wrong door and thought I was not opening it. He got angry. When Prigozhin realized his mistake and tried the right room, Masha sat motionless on the bed. Everything was very fast. He had a small penis. Well, sorry, let me clarify. He had a very small penis, in which there were some kind of balls embedded under the skin. He just left the money in a pile on the chair. It was 100,000 rubles. I had to take 40,000 for myself and 60,000 for the pimp. And when Prigozhin took his leave of Masha, he instructed her to be nicer, owing to her dour expression on her face. She said, even with my insane personality, selling my virginity to Prigozhin was a bit over the top, she said. Anyway, I felt really down. I remember that day I was thinking about not being late for a doctor's appointment of the psychiatric hospital. Well, if you were going to get anyone to do this. Masha was one of the countless women Prigozhin has visited in the Solosoks, where his underlings kept a ready supply of them. The virgins, Masha learned, he dubbed shampoo, after the disposable bottles found in hotel bathrooms. You opened them and tossed them away. Okay, so first things first. Do I think this is true? I don't know. I mean, it looks real. They've confirmed the identity. They've posted this photograph, but at the end of the day, nothing's 100% true. And when you've gotten stories like it's hot, I don't want to call it hot and steamy, but when you've gotten stories as eye-catching headline grabbing as this, there's always going to be a question about authenticity. But do I think this matches the nature of who Prigozhin is? Can I imagine Prigozhin doing this? Absolutely. The dude ran troll farms, was a street thug, a common criminal on the street, who became a hot dog merchant, who was almost certainly engaged in money laundering activities, and then he expanded his activities to eventually be a caterer for Vladimir Putin, to become Putin's quote-unquote Putin's chef, what people refer to him as, but he was Putin's caterer. Then he managed the troll farms, as well as managed Wagner's activity in Africa with people like Dmitry Utkin, who managed more of the military side, before eventually bloating the organization into his own little private personal army in Ukraine, before making a military push, I guess you could say military mutiny, against the Russian government. This is somebody who's been engaged in criminal activity since the very start, who was a common street thug, engaged in this type of activity, and so the idea that he would be hiring prostitutes regularly and doing this kind of weird, creepy shit is not that crazy to me. Considering that one of his right-hand men, Dmitry Utkin, is an esoteric neo-Nazi weirdo, it's not that crazy that not Dmitry Utkin, but Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was, again, a street thug engaged in criminal activity, would do stuff like this and have some weird, wacky beliefs about virginity. Very strange person. And the fact that somebody like this can get that high up in Russian politics, and to get that close to Russian power during the mutiny, should be very telling to the Russian public and I think the wider world. What a weird, weird freak. What a weird, weird freak.